Hello everyone, this is the Metaphysical MGTOW Griffin Red, and the name of this video is Jane Elizabeth Manning James, a Mormon Mammy. I had the idea to do this video, and it was in response to Tito's masterpiece of a video called Who Are the Real House Niggas? Now, as you know, the Mormon church was started by Joseph Smith, I believe back in the early 1800s or whatever. And they have some really strange beliefs, and they believe that black people have the mark of Cain or whatever, and they deserve to be slaves or whatever. And it wasn't until 1980 that they decided that blacks could join the priesthood. Now, I remember watching a documentary on the Mormon cult and everything like that, and I remember a black woman who was so adamantly loyal to Joseph Smith that she got sealed to the church as a servant to Joseph Smith for all eternity. So I found a couple articles online, and one was from the Salt Lake Tribute, and I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to read another article, which is off the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints website, and then I'll give you my thoughts, and then you could take it from there. All right, the first one is from the Salt Lake Tribute commentary. Black Mormon pioneer Jane Manning James, only member ever sealed as a servant, finally gets her due. By Jonna Rice, Religious News Service, June 13th, 2009. It's been quite a year for Jane Manning James, finally. First, there was the feature film Jane and Emma, released last autumn, which focused on the friendship between Emma Smith, the first wife of Mormon founder Joseph Smith, and Jane Manning, an African-American convert living with their family in Nauvoo, Illinois. And now, at last, there is a full-fledged biography of Jane, which just released from Oxford University Press, Your Sister in the Gospel, by historian Quincy Newell. Newell is an associate professor of religious studies at Hamilton College in Central New York. I sat down with Quincy last week at the MHA to discuss the new book. Question: what drew you to this project? I was working on a project about 19th century African American, Native American Mormons, and stuff about Jane just kept popping up in my research and threatened to take over the whole project. I like to joke that I made a deal with Jane, that I'll write her biography if she would leave me alone. So I've written a biography. Well, we'll see if she leaves me alone. It was surprising of how ubiquitous references to her turned out to be in unexpected places. She was showing up at people's diaries and meeting minutes in the women's exponent. Can you tell her why her story is so vital? I was interested in what it was like to be a black person in a church that was trying so hard to be white. Her religious experience is so different from what we would expect. She was speaking in tongues, doing faith healings. She's having all these charismatic experiences. Those have been pushed out of Mormonism, but were actually very common in the 19th century. So her story provides a nice corrective to the standard narrative of Mormon history, which focuses on white men and, to a lesser extent, on white women. That history largely focused on the priesthood and missions and temple building. She's black and woman. She doesn't have access to the priesthood. So anytime she needs a blessing for her and her family, someone has to be brought in from outside the family circle. She doesn't have access to endowments or ceilings, so her connection to the divine is not temple-centric so much as centered in those charismatic experiences. She gives us different sense of what Mormonism is. She also gives us a different sense of the kinds of narratives we might want to think about in African American religious history. She grew up in a small town in Connecticut and heads to Illinois and what becomes urban Utah. None of those are really spaces we tend to think of African Americans having a presence, particularly not a religious presence. Mormonism obviously is not a standard choice for 19th century African Americans. But if we start thinking about Jane in that narrative of African American religious history, that helps us remember that Sojourner Truth got involved with the prophet Matthias for a while, and Harriet Jacobs got involved in spiritualism. There are already African Americans in these different small religions, which complicates and expands the narrative that all African Americans are Protestants. And next question. Throughout her life, Jane petitioned church leaders for access to the temple. Can you explain the significance of the temple for Jane? Well, for Latter-day Saints, the temple in the 19th century becomes the site where rituals are performed that they believe are crucial to their full salvation. So they do baptisms for the dead, rituals called endowments, initiation rituals, and sealings that follow the scriptural injunction that whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Mormons take that quite literally and believe that people who are bound together in sealing rituals on earth will be bound in heaven. Husband and wives, parents and children. Jane was allowed to do baptism for her dead relatives in the temple, but because she was black, she was not allowed to participate in endowment and sealing rituals. And she and her co-religionists all believed that when she died, she and her family would be separated and she would not be allowed to achieve the highest degree of exaltation in the afterlife. She was barred because she was black. Many white Americans and Europeans believe that blackness indicated descent from Cain. That gets expanded a bit in other LDS scriptures, so it was a common belief in Mormonism, but it gets institutionalized in Mormonism in a way we don't see in other religions. The corollary to the priesthood ban was the temple restriction, which kept people of African descent out of endowment and sealing rituals. From the 1800s up until her death in 1908, Jane keeps pestering church leaders for permission to be sealed to Joseph Smith as a child, which she said he had offered to her. During that time, a lot of white saints were asking to be sealed to Joseph Smith as a child, and it was granted to them. So she's asking for this thing that other Mormons around her are getting, but she keeps hearing no. And I think it's because the leaders just can't imagine Joseph Smith having a black daughter for eternity. Finally, the leaders get fed up and compromise by creating a ceremony that seals her to Joseph Smith, but not as a daughter. Instead, they seal her as a servant. They do that sealing in the Salt Lake Temple in 1894. Jane is alive and well at the time, but she is not allowed to be present. Zena Young stands as a proxy for Jane, and Joseph Smith stands as a proxy for his uncle, Joseph Smith. She's sealed to Joseph Smith as a servant, which is a role she had played in her mortal life, since she had been a servant in his household in Nauvoo, Illinois. So church leaders set her up to play that role for all eternity. This stupid bitch, this groveling, bootlicking, mammy ass bitch, pestered this funky ass church to be sealed as a fucking servant. You stupid ass bitch, you. Now let's go to this other one. This other article. And it's by, it's actually from the Mormon website. And I'm just going to read the first couple paragraphs. I'm going to read this down here, and it's a quote from her. And it says, once in Nauvoo, Jane quickly developed a friendship with Joseph and Emma Smith. She lived with them and worked in their household. At one point, Emma invited Jane to be adopted as a child into the Smith family by a priesthood sealing. Jane declined, misunderstanding the unfamiliar new practice, but she firmly believed in Joseph's prophetic role. And I quote, this is what she said. I did know the prophet Joseph, she later testified. He was the finest man I ever saw on earth. And I was certain he was a prophet because I knew it. You bootlicking ass mammy, you. And then through conversations with Joseph and with his mother, Lucy Mack Smith, Jane learned more about the Book of Mormon and its translation and gained an understanding and a respect for temple ordinances. And it says, I'm going to just go down here to the end. It says, she died April 16th, 1908 at the age of 85, always a faithful Latter-day Saint. The Desert News report, a few persons were noted for faith and faithfulness than was Jane Manning James. And though of the humble earth, she numbered friends and acquaintances by the hundreds. Now, there's a true house nigga mammy for you right there. This bitch sat up here and pestered the church to be sealed as a fucking servant. Self-loathing fat ass mammy. Jane Manning James is not worthy of any reverence, and she should not be regarded as a hero. She should be vilified and forgotten because she was a goddamn mammy. This is pathetic. I'm gonna leave the article, links to the articles in the description box of this video, and leave your comments. And hell, you can write what you think or whatever, because this really made me sick. Stay tuned for more.